Hey, what's up guys, Jaeky here. Today I'm going to be going over my 2025 Valorant settings. That includes my in-game settings, monitor settings, and I'm also going to be going over some of the desktop settings that I changed as well, and my mouse and keyboard settings. So yeah, let's get right into it. Also, if you want to stay up to date with any of my settings, like if I change my sensitivity ever, you can always go to my Twitch page and type the command like ! sensitivity, resolution, or even for my peripherals like mouse and keyboard. And you can get all of my up-to-date stuff on there because I always keep that updated. But yeah, let's get right into it with the in-game settings here. So pretty basic. On the general tab, for enemy highlight color, I've just always used yellow. I think I used red at the beginning of the game, but I switched to yellow and have just stayed on this for pretty much forever now. Moving down to the sensitivity, I play on 0.15 and that's at 1600 DPI. If I'm on 800 DPI, obviously this is 0.3. I've always stayed around that 240 eDPI area and I'm pretty comfortable there. Moving down to scoped and ADS sensitivity multiplier, these are both 1. I don't really feel a need to change these. And then with the recent upgrade to Unreal Engine 5, they took out raw input buffer, so that's no longer a setting. I think it's just always on now. These are my minimap settings. I think these are some of the best minimap settings that you can have. You always want to make sure you turn off keep player center so that you can see the entire map. That way you get more information. And then rotate and fixed is personal preference. I prefer it on rotate. And then minimap size I have at 1, which I think is default. And then minimap zoom I have set to 0.9 so that I can see the entire map. On some maps, if you have this on 1, it cuts off some of the corners. So 0.9, you can see all of the map. And then all of this is personal preference. Down here, I turned off mature content because I prefer seeing the sparks, and I also don't like seeing the bodies on the ground because sometimes it can block some stuff. Moving on to bullet tracers, sometimes I play with this off, sometimes I play with this on. Really just depends on my mood. It doesn't really affect too much in game. It's kind of just a personal preference thing, but right now I have it on. Moving on to controls, most of this is default. All of my ability keys I didn't change at all. All of it is default. But moving down, I do use mouse wheel down to jump, just because I'm used to that from CS, and in my opinion, it just makes movement a little bit easier. Moving on to the equipment tab, I use toggle for my sights for both sniper and ADS. I think using hold just creates like unnecessary tension, which sometimes can mess up your aim. Plus, if you're like opping and holding an angle for a really long time, I prefer toggle because if you're holding, you're just going to be holding that and it's going to make your hand tired. So that's why I use toggle. And then operator zoom, I also use toggle. For the operator zoom hold, I use cycle, which means if I hold down my right click, then it will go into a double scope. And if I click my right click once, it will go into a single scope. And then auto re-enter scope, I have this on just because I'm used to it from CS. This is just personal preference. And then moving down here, the only things I've changed is auto equip prioritizes. I make sure to have this on strongest so that if you're tapping the spike, for example, after you tap the spike, it will always pull out your primary gun. If you're playing an agent like Yoru and you like pulling out your shorty after you exit your ult, then this is something that you might want to change to most recently equipped. You can also create a custom agent profile for Yoru and set it to most recently equipped if you're one of those players who like to shotgun people out of their ult. And then don't auto-equip melee, I also have this checked for the same reason. And then down here, pretty much everything is default. Moving on to communication, I use V for my in-game voice chat. I think it's a very comfortable key to press with my thumb. So yeah, I use V to comm in-game and then my side mouse button for party chat. And the only other things I change here is the ping key. I think it's on middle mouse by default, or no, it's on Z by default. I change it to T for ping. And I change my spray to Z, which is just swapping it. And then the interface tab here is all default. For crosshair, you can go to my tracker to see all of the crosshairs that I use. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But the main ones that I use is this dot right here. Right now I'm on a 1080p 600 Hz, so I'm using the regular thickness 2 dot. If I'm on a 1440p OLED, for example, I'll use this crosshair. All of this is on my tracker. I also use the 1420 every now and then. I don't really use the 1422 that much, but I still have it on here. And then this is just a shortened 1422, which Alexander likes to use. Yeah, but mainly I just use the dot. I think it's a pretty goated crosshair for Val, and that's pretty much it. Moving on to the video tab. So I play full screen. You want to make sure you're playing full screen for the least amount of input lag. I also play native. I don't play stretched, fake stretch, true stretch. I don't do any of that. Just 1920 by 1080 native resolution. Aspect ratio method doesn't matter if you're playing native, but I just default letterbox. And then the FPS stuff I don't really touch. but I do uncap my FPS limit because I am using a 600 Hz. Back when I was using a 360 Hz on my OLED, I would cap this FPS at 400, but now that I'm using a 600 Hz, obviously I want to leave it uncapped. And then NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency, I have this set to on plus boost. Moving on to the graphics tab, I have everything in here set to low. Multi-threaded rendering I have on. All of this is off. I have none 1x, and then everything here is off. And then for the stats tab, this is personal preference, but the only thing I show is my client FPS as well as my network RTT, which is your ping. Sometimes I'll turn on packet loss total if I feel like I'm losing packets just to see, or the jitter if I feel like my internet's lagging, but other than that, I don't really turn anything else on. Moving on to the audio tab, this is all personal preference. When I'm playing the game, I have this turned up all the way. I have all these sliders down. And then HRTF, I highly recommend turning this on. Just makes the audio better, helps you pinpoint audio a lot better. And then obviously this is stereo. Voice chat, also just personal preference, but this is what my stuff looks like. And then voiceover, I have everything checked except for this last one. I think this is just default, to be honest. I don't think I've touched this. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the in-game settings. Okay, moving on, let's go over the desktop settings that I change. First up, a lot of people ask me about my NVIDIA 3D settings, and I don't touch any of this. So in adjust settings, image settings with preview, I have it on let the 3D application decide, which is default. And then manage 3D settings is all default because it's just going through this. So I don't touch anything in here. Like all of this is all default. Adjust desktop size and position, I don't touch any of this. It's just on whatever the default is. So yeah, I don't touch anything inside of here. Windows settings, game mode I have on, game bar I turn off. I also disable enhanced pointer precision, even though this doesn't really matter too much in Valorant because Valorant uses raw input. I still disable this just out of habit and for other games as well. So this is usually checked. Make sure you uncheck this and then apply. Click OK. Obviously, you want to make sure that your Windows is up to date. So I always like come in here sometimes, check for updates and make sure everything is up to date. I also go into here, make sure that there's no optional updates that I need to download. And then every now and then I'll also go and check my motherboard page and I'll make sure that I'm on the latest BIOS that's not beta, so this one. And then I'll also make sure I have the latest chipset drivers, which I do, and also the Realtek internet drivers. Make sure everything's up to date there. And then I also make sure that my graphics drivers are up to date. So I go into here sometimes and just make sure that I'm on the latest NVIDIA drivers. And I always make sure when I install new graphics drivers that I do a clean install. There's an option that you can check for clean install. I always make sure to do that. And then I don't install the audio drivers. I only do the PhysX drivers and the actual graphics drivers themselves. And that's it. And that's pretty much it. I just make sure my computer's fully up to date. And now finally, let's go over my mouse keyboard settings as well as my monitor settings. Okay, so obviously right now I'm using the G Pro Superlight 2. For my headset, I'm using the G522. And then for my keyboard, I'm using the Wooting 60 HE. So let's go over my mouse settings first. I do have onboard memory mode on, so let me turn that off. So I just have a custom profile in here with one DPI slot. Like I said, right now I'm using 1600 DPI just because I'm trying it out. Usually I use 800, but I figured I'd try out 1600 for a bit. And yeah, it's not too bad. For polling rate, I use 2000. I don't use anything above 2000. If you want to know why, you can check out Optimum Tech and Rocket Jump Ninja's video on polling rate. They made really good videos explaining why anything above 2000 is negligible and just waste your battery life. So I use 2000. I don't do any hero sensor calibration, and then everything else is default. Like the liftoff distance here is default, which is medium, so I don't touch anything in there. And then in the actual mouse settings, I have optical only and gaming surface mode on, and then I turn on the onboard memory mode so that I don't have to leave this software open. And then now let's go over the wooting settings. So for my wooting, I have tachyon mode on. Actuation point, I have 2.0 on every key except for my WASD, which I lowered to 1.0. And this is just so I don't fat finger any of the other keys, and I really only need it on my movement keys anyways. So that's why I do that. And then rapid trigger, I have it turned on for every key at the most sensitive at 0.15. And that's pretty much all I do in here. I don't use SOCD. I have tried it out. I don't really think it makes a difference for me personally, especially in Valorant. So I don't use that, and I don't use anything else that's crazy. I have the RGB turned off and everything, so pretty basic wooting settings. I will have a code to my wooting profile in the description if you guys just want to copy that. But that's pretty much it for that. Now let's go over my monitor settings. So like I mentioned earlier, this is the Zowie 600 Hz, the XL2586X Plus. I use standard. I set this to standard mode, and then after that I changed the settings. So for my desktop profile, as in like not playing Valorant at all, I don't use black EQ. Color vibrance is default on 10. No blue light, gamma on 3, which is default, and then normal color temperature. And then I have diac on premium, brightness 80, contrast 50, sharpness 5, AMA high. And that's like all the important stuff. And then for my second profile, so if I click this too, it switches over to my Valorant profile, which this one I do have black equalizer on 10, color vibrance on 13, which is a slight little bump. Same thing for low blue light 0, gamma 3, normal color temperature, diac premium still, 80 brightness, 50 contrast, 5 sharpness, and high AMA. So only thing that changes between my Valorant profile and my desktop profile is the black EQ, as well as the color vibrance. Alright guys, that's pretty much it. Those are my updated 2025 settings for Valorant. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.